Welcome to Off-Chain Podcast. I'm your host, Don Reddin, and today my guest is Anna Hall, founder and CEO of Embody, the first privacy-forward period tracker that uses end-to-end encryption to safeguard the most personal information women possess and ensure it can't be shared, sold, or used against them. We're excited to talk to her about her experiences in the Web3 space, being a founder, and why she's so passionate about guarding women's health data and privacy. Let's dive in. Anna, how did you get started in Web3? What's your origin story?
Okay, so I have a very unique origin story here. I inadvertently became a part of the Web3 space in about 2014, so pretty early on, via my partner who, we were living in Atlanta and he had a startup and they were looking for funding. And so he moved to California, to Silicon Valley, and I was finishing my master's degree in Atlanta, but then came to join him. And that's really where our Web3 journey began. And so it was definitely, if you've seen the show Silicon Valley on HBO, it was wildly accurate. And so,
wow, that's interesting. So any particular kinds of aspects of the show that was true to life for you?
It was just like everything that was in the show was like 2 weeks behind what was actually happening in Silicon Valley. Like I remember this season with the ICO, we were like, oh my gosh, we were just experiencing this and like making decisions about how the company was going to change based on the Silicon Valley environment at the time. And so it was really exciting. We always had we lived with co-founders and we always had a whiteboard in our home. And there were a lot of like, do we sell? Do we not? Do we, I think, although at one point I was technically on the books of this startup, the company is folded and it still exists. We decided not to sell. I was always in the background and watching this process of this idea coming to life. And that was really exciting. My background is in special education. So I work with young adults with disabilities, specifically with assistive technology. So I've always had an interest in technology and applications for people. So as I was working with people, I was also seeing this idea be born. And that was the case for years and years. And then 2020 happened and I resigned from my teaching job. Unfortunately, it was just too much with young children. And I was kind of at this moment where I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. I think we all have those moments. And I was thankful to be able to have the time and the space to really decide my next move. While this was happening, at the same time, I was diagnosed with something called PMDD. So this is a premenstrual disorder. And if you're not familiar, I think everyone knows what PMS is, right? So it's like PMS, but heightened and longer. And I experienced this after my second child. So I had just gotten this diagnosis. I was overwhelmed by all this information about menstrual health that I had never heard before. At 31, I was learning that there are 4 phases of my menstrual cycle, not just one. You're going to hear the Web3 connection in a moment. And within 6 months of me finding out this diagnosis, I was living in the United States. We were back in Georgia in a red state, and Roe v. Wade was overturned. So in my state that has a trigger law, women were no longer able to have abortions after 6 weeks. So the Web3 application here is that most women, a third of women in the United States and about 50 million women worldwide, use a period tracker app on their phone. But we were told by security experts that, okay, your menstrual health data is no longer safe in these apps. So delete your apps, go back to pen and paper. And this is when I had my moment where I was like, this is ridiculous. I know there is tech that can solve this issue for women. We don't need pen and paper. We need much more sophisticated tools that we're used to. And so this is when I had the moment for Embody. And we are a menstrual health app We focus on wellness on all four phases of the cycle. And we are the most secure tracker on the market. So we're encrypted, we're open source, and we're local first. And we have some really exciting Web3 applications coming around. So my origin story, this is a long story, and it's kind of complicated with twists and turns. But essentially, I saw where I can make a difference in both the Web3 space and with people to solve a real problem.
That's an epic journey. Okay, so if we kind of roll back to the beginning there, you said 2014. That's pretty early for Web3. There's a couple of different cohorts. There's like 2008, 2009, 2012, 2014, 2017, DeFi summer, 2020, and then basically rolling since then. So 2014 is pretty early, I should say. And were you in Web3? You mentioned being kind of tangentially, you observed it. Were you also dabbling? Was there any kind of investing or watching, or was it mostly watching your partner building in that environment?
It's interesting. I think I read a study that really hit home with me recently that was like 70% of CEOs admit to their partner playing a very large role in their decision-making at a company-wide level, which I don't know is the common knowledge. But so I will say, I felt like I feel like I was in the shadows. And because my husband, enjoys risk-taking, obviously, I felt like I was the counterpart. I paid the rent. I had the insurance. And so I didn't personally actively invest at that time. Oh, small amounts, play. Yeah. There was a lot of learning there. Oh my gosh. And it was just so, I feel like we were on the roller coaster. We've been on the roller coaster since 2014, right? We've seen the ups and downs. It's really changed significantly. But at this point, I'm not alarmed by any of the dips. And I get like cautiously excited about the peaks. But I feel like that's a really good place to be as I'm building a kind of unique business in Web3.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So again, going back to you were around it. In fact, you were pretty much immersed in it, given what you were saying about the living with in Silicon Valley with founders, husband doing the founding work. You were studying and then educating, then having young kids, and I'm just wondering, all of a sudden, maybe not all of a sudden, but you become aware of a big problem, a personal problem, but then it makes you more aware of a general problem. And then how do you go from that to, I can do something about this?
Yeah, I really think, 2020 was like a moment of reckoning for so many people, right? We were all feeling the need to help. At least most people I know were feeling that. And so there was a lot of soul searching. And I felt like this kind of, I'm a passionate educator. I saw this huge gap in education. And again, I had this background knowledge of the tools that solve this problem, but I wasn't seeing anybody put two and two together here. And honestly, I was talking with a friend about this the other day. It's been like the year of the infrastructure for Web3 for like a decade. So I just think it's time to move away from, okay, gambling's fun, making money's great. What are some real practical applications that help real people in this space? And that has just not been explored enough. And so, I like taking risks to some degree too, right? And I see that this is a risk, but I also saw a moment where I could make a very clear, direct impact. I went through a long process of validating this idea, and presenting it to Thesis, which is the venture studio I'm a part of and that I co-own. My husband did say, he says, I cannot be a part of this. You'll have to talk to leadership beyond me if this is something that you want to go through. So I spent time with this proposal. And in that process, I heard the story of so many women and gathered a lot of data that I'm not the only one feeling this way. So many women, all my friends were deleting their trackers and feeling like, well, what am I going to do now? And just like marking in their paper calendar. And it's, when somebody says, go back to pen and paper, that's like, okay, if you're used to having a really sophisticated health tracker, do you want to go back to tracking your workouts with pen and paper? If you're used to using Google Sheets or Excel, do you want to go back to budgeting with pen and paper? Like, there are just things that these tools can do that's beyond jotting down a note. Menstrual health is complicated. It impacts every moment of your life as a woman and childbearing age. And, we deserve sophisticated tools that are safe. So that's what we're creating.
Yeah, that's awesome. In that regard, like you said, there are period tracking apps that have been around for, as long as apps have been around, basically. Early ones were essentially like a spreadsheet, but in their own kind of encapsulated app. What is it that sets apart what you're doing compared to what's already happening on the market? You've touched on a little bit about privacy. What kind of sets you apart in that regard?
Right. Well, there are three things in particular that set us apart. The one I've been discussing right now has been the privacy layers. We have 3 layers of privacy. Again, we're fully encrypted, we're open source, so that can be verified, and we're local first. So offline first, all of our users' data will stay on their phone unless they opt into connectivity. Otherwise, their data never touches the cloud. And we believe that should be the norm for healthcare data, is that it is owned by the individual first. That is core to who we are. But I think a lot of our listeners and that privacy isn't that sexy or exciting. And what's really exciting about this moment in time is there's this huge menstrual wellness movement happening in Australia, in the United States, and in other places around the world, where we are tuning into the fact that our cycles have a lot more impact on us than we were taught. Just like we all as humans experience a circadian rhythm, you wouldn't necessarily go work out at midnight. In the same way, people who menstruate live along this monthly timeline. And there are 4 phases within their cycle, each with their own set of unique symptoms, right? And so what's different about our app is the privacy feature and a 4-phase focus. So we're allowing women to track their symptoms, learn about patterns in their symptoms with really robust analytics, and then apply what they've learned about their bodies with practical advice from experts. So in the areas of nutrition, fitness, mental health, relationships, sleep, pleasure, all of these things are affected by which phase in your cycle you are. And there are experts who are teaching women about how to live to support those symptoms so they can really live their best, healthiest life. And this is a fairly new area. I think a lot of people get their information from TikTok, from Instagram. I first learned about, this is called cycle syncing, is when you set practices to your phases of your cycle. I first learned about this when I was diagnosed with PMDD. I was really struggling. I would have a week where I felt like myself. The next week, I would feel a little off. And then I had a week where everything came kind of crashing down. And then the next week was spent picking up the pieces. But once I learned from a nutritionist and from a therapist how to use cycle syncing to support my wellness, those things tapered out and I could really reduce my symptoms and live well throughout the month by incorporating different practices into my daily schedule that supported my health as a woman, which is very specific and different from the health of a man. So we have the cycle syncing aspect, we have the security, and then something I'm really excited about, and this is a Web3 specific feature that we are intending to build within the next 6 months. It's called Inner Circle. What Inner Circle does, it's a decentralized social network for women. It allows you to invite 5 of your closest friends out in real life to see where you are in your cycle. You get a daily prompt from the app asking a question that a cycle coach, and this is somebody who kind of guides somebody in cycle syncing practices, you get a question from a cycle syncing coach saying, on a scale of 1 to 5, what's your energy like today? Or have you had any cravings lately? Or when's the last time you cried in your car? Questions that kind of prompt the type of dialogue that we have with our close, trusted friends that allow us to learn from each other. We're creating that safe space where none of this information that we're sharing with each other can be used against us. But we can talk freely about the things that, the ways in which we're affected by our menstrual cycle, and ways we can support each other. You see your friends' responses throughout the day, and it's ephemeral. Okay, so it's a small network of your trusted friends and a decentralized platform. You see your friends' responses, you see where they are in their cycle, you learn about each other from each other, and the next day it's a new question. So this is a really different take, and I think it's a kind of niche way to enter the decentralized social network space. I'm really excited about this. We have a lot of users who are excited about this as well. I think we are inherently social beings, and that this makes a lot of sense for this place and time. So that was a lot of information, but essentially, privacy, our commitment to privacy, a 4-phase focus, and then our Inner Circle feature are what makes us very different from other period trackers. We're not really a period tracker. We are a full cycle wellness app.
Yeah, I was going to say, even as you're explaining it, I was thinking that's significantly more than period tracking is really even kind of overall women's health, kind of covering a whole basket of things and really kind of, I guess, laying a foundation for even more. I love the idea of things like actually utilizing blockchain technology, for its actual use at application level, both with the decentralized social network aspect, but then also just the privacy aspect. I'm just wondering, you mentioned TikTok is one of the places that people tend to get information from now. As I think about TikTok, that's like the absolute opposite of Web3 and blockchain. That is, and privacy as well. I mean, security. Any of those kinds of things that Web3 maximalists kind of philosophically or ideologically hold to, TikTok's the opposite of that. And so why do you think it is that so many people would go to somewhere like that? And why don't people care so much about privacy?
It's so challenging, right? It's like taking your vitamins. Really, it's not exciting. It's not sexy. TikTok is, but it's something that it's not just Web3. It's not just the Web3 community that is kind of turning on to the need for privacy. There's been a huge growth in the distrust of apps in particular that store health data. I remember seeing a study that came out last year that's saying that I think it's grown distrust, or I think the applicant or the participants were saying that they decided not to input health data into an app for security reasons, and that has increased by 20% over the last year alone. So this distrust is growing culturally. I think specifically with healthcare data in the United States, post-Roe, this is when it's one of those things where you don't realize you need it until you're in trouble, until you realize that it could really affect your life in a negative way. And unfortunately, that's something that a lot of women are, and partners of women going through all of this in the United States are waking up to. I think that this trend is going to continue to grow. And the desire for privacy is going to become more and more appealing to people. But like I said,
I certainly hope so.
I know. And that's something that we've struggled. I'll be honest, that's something we've struggled with as a company is, do we put our privacy foot forward, or do we put our cycle syncing content foot forward? And I think what I continuously hear from women is they want both. Okay. Yeah. And both are possible. And this is where I'm coming from too. There's a need for both. And
with your background as an educator, is that something that just helps you to educate, or do you feel like an inner burden that, I must educate, not just provide the solution, or a really positive way forward, but then also, I need to educate people as well, not just in how your application works, but just security and privacy generally. Is that part of it as well, or is that just a really good foundation for you?
No, absolutely. And I'm trying to find advice that I get as a new founder has been that I focus too much on the education, because I this is who I am. I'm an educator, and I think it's really critical that especially women right now understand how their health data can be used against them in the court of law. If you're subpoenaed for a suspected abortion, or if you're a doctor who's practicing and in the United States, and you're at risk for getting sued for choices you make about women's health. There's so much that we don't know that is going to begin to impact us in the next couple of years. And so I think I feel a duty, of course, just as a human, an educator, to subtly share education about safety and security when it comes to your health data. And then in the same way, I feel that we've missed a lot of education in regards to our menstrual health and our reproductive health as women. And so I think a lot of people don't want to sit and hear a lecture, right? A lot of the type of education that our app is providing is integrated into the app experience. So we're focusing on that.
Have there been any cases of like the security breaches in healthcare apps? What's the kind of landscape they've been like?
So there have been healthcare consequences in terms of legal prosecution coming from apps beyond healthcare apps that are the primary concern right now. Apps like Facebook Messenger and other ways that people think they're communicating safely with their loved ones and are not. And yes, the Facebook Messenger data has been used to prosecute women in the United States for suspected abortions. And actually, just not too long ago, I believe it was 12 attorneys general in the United States wrote an open letter to Tim Cook saying, hey, a lot of the apps that are on the App Store, the iOS App Store, are not safe for women to use. And we see this becoming a very large problem in the coming years. So I think that there's this overall awareness of what could happen, and it is beginning to happen. And we're seeing cases come out every couple months where somebody who thought they were sharing a message safely realizes that their data, their messages are not safe. And it's really sad. And we see this happening with really young people, teenagers who really haven't gotten the education about their bodies that they need And, they're both them and their parents are kind of suffering the consequences of a lack of education and a lack of privacy. And those are things that we care deeply about as a company, and Embody is trying to solve.
All right. So when it comes to things like the end-to-end encryption, obviously that's super important. But even in the decentralized social network, like giving another area to message that's not in a suspect or potentially open or potentially kind of either breachable or subpoenable kind of arena. Are you worried about, in Australia at least, where I am, there's a little bit of pushback against end-to-end encryption from government. Have you faced any kind of pushback in that regard? Because obviously where people have been able to access data in the past, they're very hesitant to give up access to that data in the future. I'm someone who's in Web3. One of the big things I love about Web3 is the distribution, is the decentralization, is the privacy and trustlessness of it. Have you found any pushback or even any suspicion from people who've been told, delete your apps, but here's a safe one?
To be honest, directly, no. Okay. I've seen it happen to other people in this space, but for us, not yet. The main concerns around privacy and just decentralization so far have been around growth, and also around can we have analytics that are powerful enough, because we are competing with wearables and other things that have so much data and interconnectivity. But this is a decision we've made as a company, and we're kind of holding the line and standing our ground and finding really creative solutions for these problems. I'm working with a team of 5 other women. We are a fully female team at this point. Our engineer, our mobile dev is in Sao Paulo. Our product designer is in the Netherlands. We have a growth person in New York. We also have an Aussie contributor who's on the Gold Coast. And, I think holding our privacy line is a choice. It's a big one. But we have the team and the knowledge and the supported thesis, who has a whole applied cryptography team to back us up, and an established respect in this space, to kind of establish ourselves as the leaders in this space for privacy.
Well, can you talk a bit more about?
I'm curious to see if we do get pushed back. It just hasn't happened yet.
Talk me through thesis. So working with an incubator or an accelerator or venture studio is often for many projects, it can boost them incredibly. Obviously, you already have interest in thesis in a couple of different arenas. You've basically, if I ask how did you end up working with them, you've answered that a little bit already. Why them in particular? Was it because of the access? Is it because of the things that they're working on? There are a lot of venture studios. This sounds like I said, a legitimate use case of blockchain technology. Why go with thesis?
It really comes down to values alignment. Thesis builds freedom tech. I think this is how I saw it aligning. Is it's deeply rooted in the value add that Web3 can have in not only making money, but also in public good and safety. And so that's when it became a clear path for us. Beyond that, it's a supportive community for new startups, especially in this space. They have a team, like I said, a team of expert cryptographers to help with the security aspect, and then just really a culture of growing their projects, supporting their projects, and wishing them well. So our trajectory is to spin out by the end of next Q1. So we will be our own separate entity after that point.
That's cool. That's really cool. Are you finding that like when you were the spouse of a startup founder and you were inputting there, are you finding that the same is true in the other direction?
That's a good point. That's a good question. It's funny because, when I decided to try for this, I think there was this understanding that we would work in the same organization, but be fairly separate. But I think that and we have to be careful not to constantly talk about work. It's we're both very passionate about what we're doing. And so it's hard to sometimes have a separate life and identity outside of work. Luckily, we have young children who, like, just by nature of who they are, take you out of that work mode and say, look at me, pay attention to the moment. But yeah, I think it's been really, we kind of like had this divide and conquer aspect to our relationship for a long time. And now we're doing such similar work. It's really quite fun. And I think we understand where each of us needs support at different times and in different ways. It's really helped with empathy and understanding each other.
This sounds like a team. Sounds great, actually. Yeah. And in terms of working with an all-female team, females in the Web3 space, but even in fintech more generally, and technology, more broadly, are still incredibly underrepresented. How is this was it an intentional thing to have only women on your team, at least at this stage? Is it just these are the best people you could find at the time? Not at the time, like at this time. Help me kind of, I hope our audience understand. I'm not asking to speak on behalf of all women everywhere, but for you personally, how is being a woman in a space where women are underrepresented impacting or affecting your decisions?
Really, it's been an incredible experience. All of our team members come from a Web3 background, which I think is very unique. And we just kind of found each other. Obviously, we had job postings and we have some connections, but I feel like each of us came to Embody in a fairly serendipitous way. And we've really used our Web3 connections wisely. I think women in Web3 feel this sense of camaraderie because we are the underdogs. And we seek each other out and support each other in this journey. It's really been a great experience because one of our kind of cultural tenets is to be open about the way in which being a woman affects our work, and both in a sometimes negative way and often in a really positive way. And what I mean by this is like I said, there are 4 phases of your cycle, each that come with their own symptoms, each that comes with its own strengths and weakness. So for example, the luteal phase, which is the one right before menstruation happens, is a time where a lot of menstruators feel very calm and collected and can get a lot of writing and more thoughtful, quiet work done. And so, and during ovulation, so that time when the woman releases an egg, this is when they're most social. They tend to have a spike in energy, are flirtatious. This is a good time for social work. So giving presentations, meeting new potential partners, pitching, these kinds of things. So with that type of knowledge about when you do your best work, you take that to the team, especially if it's a team of women. And we say, I am on day 24 of my cycle. I'm feeling tired, but I feel like I can get a lot of introspective work done. I can write a blog post. And then I'm planning for, in 2 weeks when I'm feeling my best, this reaching out to this person and having a good conversation about ways in which we can work together. We do that. We plan together based on our cycles. This is part of like dog fooding, practicing what we preach. But also, I think it makes us a really powerful team. I haven't mentioned it yet, but we have an app. We are in a closed beta period. And, really we shipped the app from March until August. as a team of, at that time we were a team of 3, and together we shipped the beta of the app pretty swiftly. And I think part of that was because we were really in sync with each other's strengths and weaknesses, and open with each other about our experiences as women.
That's amazing. And is that a thing that you came to continue pursuing moving forward? Is that part of the plan or strategy? Yeah.
Absolutely. And we have always, interviewed men for these positions as well. And we're definitely open to working with men. We think that having allies in this type of work is really powerful. It's just happened that the best candidates and the people most excited about the project have been women so far.
Yeah.
And, but we do plan to continue this culture of learning or talking, being open with each other about our experiences and when we can do our best work as a team.
That's cool. So really, even as you were mentioning there, it sounds even like it incorporates some aspects of being a productivity platform as well, helping you understand yourself. When am I best going to work? When am I best going to not try to do work? All those kinds of things actually sounds incredibly helpful.
Yeah, this is biohacking for women, right? It's really, that's what we're doing. Right now, actually, we're creating content around work productivity and work efficiency for the app.
Oh, all right. How do you mentioned before, you're up against wearables and people who are, centralized data, ripping all of your stuff, processing it in central servers. They can get all of that data. They can do things with it, even sell it or, use it in less than great ways. How are you tackling some of those areas of perhaps weakness in being end-to-end encrypted, being, locally processing and valuing the privacy of all of your users? How do you do that and at the same time deliver increasingly good data and feedback for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And really the answer is with creativity and really brilliant minds working on these problems. So I'll give an example of a problem we're working on right now as a team. So our app as it exists now is local only. It will always be local first, but not always local only. We'll always be able to opt into some type of connectivity and more powerful analytics for that reason. But what we're trying to solve as a team right now with the supported thesis and some minds at thesis as well is we're having a brainstorming session next week, actually, is how do we take the data that people input locally and still provide really powerful analytics that give them insight into their personal patterns. We know this is doable. I'm really excited about diving into this work. We're thinking about having something, there are some apps that have like a menstrual health report every month. And what we're looking at is kind of like a cycle wrapped, like Spotify wrapped, but for your cycle that gives you just very specific feedback about your symptom patterns throughout the month. And this is from all local data. So it really does take a lot of creativity and consideration and buy-in from our early users. We have an online platform where we're talking with these early users and getting feedback about what type of analytics are they most interested in. And so we're kind of going through that process now, but I feel really encouraged by the work we've done so far that we're going to be able to provide women with some deep insights, specifically being able to track. This is not something that you can do with other apps right now, but track specific symptoms across not only dates, but across cycle days. So you can learn, okay, day 26 of my cycle, I tend to have a headache. And you see that across multiple months, okay, I can prepare for a headache around this time of my cycle. Being able to do that with specific symptoms. And then again, looking at your symptoms in this phase-based approach. What symptoms do I experience most frequently during the follicular phase? So the time between menstruation and when you ovulate. So you can kind of plan your life around experiencing those types of symptoms. I don't want to plan, a trip to Mexico when I know I'm going to be menstruating. these are the kind of thing I typically feel great during ovulation. So maybe I want to make sure that we try to plan a trip during that time. So I can really enjoy it, that type of thing. So, while we're not going to be, taking your resting heart rate at every minute. I think that the analytics that we're allowed to, that we can provide people, our users, are still going to be really insightful and powerful considering the framework we're using. That's really unique for the space.
Yeah, that's cool. I wonder, can you tap into existing things like, for example, Garmin have watches or Apple have watches? Can you take data from them without also then giving data back? Or is that not a thing?
Explain that again.
Well, so say, for example, say my phone is already tracking my heart rate from an Apple Watch. Can you get that information and incorporate it without also buying into having to give them data back?
We have not explored that yet. That'd be an interesting avenue to consider. What we have explored that's like kind of similar is, like you were saying, there are the people who started these period trackers way back in 2013. So both Flow and Clue, the competitors that have been around since 2013, they have a significant amount of data on menstrual health, right? And so we don't have to take our own users' data. They have published data, for better or for worse. They have been sued by the FTC for selling their data to third parties like Google and Facebook. This has happened. It's continuing to happen. But that also means that, we don't need our people's data. We have a huge data set already.
Yeah. I was speaking to a startup recently, without sharing any secrets, but they're trying to do they're trying to like track mental health of students in a school. And so they're trying to figure out, how do we do that while also protecting their privacy? And so I love the idea of that local first and then opting in and maybe, I don't know, even ambiguating some of the data or those kinds of things. I find if you solve that problem, I think that's going to be, how do we get really good data and feedback as a user without giving away all of our information or risking our privacy putting ourselves at risk in some of the ways you've been talking about.
Right, and without our consent. I think that's the critical piece.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, some people would be happy to opt into these things. We do often for ease and because it matters enough to us. But I think always beginning with ownership, the person owning their own data is just something I believe very strongly in. We actually published the piece about student data in our latest newsletter. So I thought that was really fascinating. And it hits home to what we're trying to accomplish is you need to be able to consent and opt into sharing such personal parts of your life.
Oh yeah. What's the regulatory framework or ecosystem in the US or around the world? How are you kind of interacting with that at the moment, specifically to do with healthcare, medical data, and those kinds of things, privacy?
It's kind of the Wild West. It feels like, there is HIPAA. So that's something that we have to make a very clear choice about. So a lot of the peer trackers out there, you'll see they have their name, and below it they say, we do not provide medical advice. And this is because of HIPAA. Right. And we're clear with that as well. We are not doctors. We do not have patients. We are a collection of wise women who have wisdom to share with women and tools to share with women to learn about their own bodies. Right. And so we have to be clear in saying that we are also not providing medical advice. And but I also think that, the health data you put into our system, into your phone and your phone alone, is a lot safer than it is in your, medical records at this point. Right. So, right.
Yeah, right.
But we kind of have to choose a path, and we are not medical providers. We are working with doctors for advice on the product, but we're not providing medical advice at this point.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, so speaking of the app, you said before you're a closed beta at the moment. Where are you? So if we go back to that as a founder, how have you found the process from idea to, okay, we actually have a product, it's in people's hands, we're getting feedback, we're getting data, and we're staring down the barrel of a public beta or even a launch. How are you thinking about this phase of startup life right now?
Oh my gosh, it is so satisfying. And it's hard. It's definitely a struggle. And there's a grind aspect to it, right? Like that's just expected. But also, and it really comes down to having a powerful team. And we have that. It's such a pleasure to be working with my partners who hold the same vision. And we can say, these are the features we want. And let's test it with users and see if they want it too. So we have a clear process for that. And then since we're so small, since we're pretty nimble, we just build it. Like, I think 3 weeks ago, we were like, okay, yeah, we really want to do a widget to just show you what day of your cycle you're on, which is such simple information, but it's so impactful. And there's a one widget on iOS for this, but we don't love it. And so we're like, okay, let's build, let's see if our users want this too. And they were, yes, they do, of course. And so we built a widget and now we're testing it internally, but that was like a 3-week turnaround and it's really satisfying. And it's such a useful tool just for me personally. I'm thrilled to have this and to be able to dream this up with a team and execute in such a short amount of time. It's satisfying. And I can't believe we're getting to do the things that we are the ideal consumers of the products we're creating. And that just is really satisfying.
That's great, man. An agile team that can actually execute. That's probably rarer than an all-female startup, but that's amazing.
Yeah. It's really cool. And like I said, I really like learning as well as educating. So it's been a joy for me to come in and kind of learn from experts in the different disciplines related to building an app, and then be able to do it myself and get my hands dirty, along with a really excellent team.
So many of our viewers and listeners are either Web3 founders or would like to be, or thinking about pivoting into something fintech or startup. What advice would you have for people who are considering it? Maybe they have an idea, whether it's personal or they just spot a gap in the market. What's your advice to go from idea to let's do it?
Yeah, just the biggest piece of advice is find something you care about. Find a real problem that affects real people. We have enough of the other things. I think it's time there's such room for creativity in the Web3 space and the application of the technology behind Web3 for very practical, people-focused purposes. So I encourage people to look around, find problems that affect people outside of the crypto community, and bring people in. I think it's going to happen in the next 3 years anyway, so might as well get a jump on it and tackle a problem that affects you directly. Because it's really hard to shill an idea and a product that you're not passionate about.
Yeah, totally. For sure. So Web3 is pretty, it's a mixed bag in terms of some people love it, some people really hate it. There are people with all kinds of ideas about the space and about life who are building in the space. I'm wondering, do you have any views or ideas that you stand alone in, or seems like nobody else agrees with you, or you're continually thinking, why doesn't everybody think like me about this? What would you say is your most contrarian view or perspective?
I think that, I'm an oddball in this space, so I think a lot of my views are contrarian. I think probably the most overarching contrarian view is that people are more important than money. NFTs are cool. Ordinals are cool. But like, again, what are the real problems affecting real people? And how can we solve for those with this sophisticated technology, this infrastructure that we've spent years building? Let's apply it to real people.
So I shouldn't be contrarian, but I think you're right in that it's not a widely held view in the space.
Right. I think people want to do it. I think building excitement, and really it still feels like a fairly exclusive community, especially if you look at decentralized social communities. They're built by men for men, and it's pretty obvious a lot of women do not feel comfortable in the Web3 community. So I think it's time that the oddballs in the space can start calling their people in, and I'm excited about that happening over the next couple of years. I see it happening.
Yeah, that's great. Speed it on. So if people want to join you, or they want to find out more about you, find out more about Embody, what you're building, if you're going to be launching that open beta soon, public beta, how can people find out more about it? How can they hear from you more?
Yeah, so open beta is going to be in November, and then our free version of the app is going to be launching publicly at the beginning of next year. If you're interested or have a partner or woman you care about who might be interested in Embody, you can go to embody.space and join our waitlist for the app. You'll also get an invitation to try out the beta if you sign up. And then also you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is PMSFTW, PMS for the win. And my name is Anna. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and you can also contact me directly if you're interested in supporting this project or have ideas for collaboration. My email address is anna@embody.space.
Thanks heaps, Anna. Really appreciate you coming on the show today. Looking forward to seeing how the open beta goes, and Lorge, would love to have you back sometime in the future to hear about how all that went.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Off Chain. We love bringing you great guests like Anna, and hope we've inspired you to learn more about Web3, about technology, about thinking about the future. And as always, like, subscribe, or better yet, share this episode with a friend. Help us spread the word, and join us again next week for another exciting episode of Off Chain with me, Don Reddin. Until then, take care.